Three, two.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. Do you want to know what it is? It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
You're listening to Hardcore Harry, and I am deaf to the New World Order, streaming to you live at freethinkradio.com, unitedtruthseekers.com, and eternally at d2nwo.com.
Well, Wall Street has faced the ire of protesters across the country for the past couple of months. Members of the movement are calling out the Wall Street fat cats for contributing to the economic decline by being greedy and corrupt. They're also angry that the same people seemingly get rewarded with big bonuses. And while the movement has brought some attention to the issue of income inequality and corporate corruption, there may be much more Wall Street doesn't want you to know about. One columnist has divulged 6 shocking revelations about Wall Street's secret government. Let's take a quick look at them. The big banks and hedge funds were in much more trouble than we were led to believe. Number 2, Wall Street's secret government made sure the largest banks would grow even larger, aided by secret funding. Number 3, the bigger Wall Street becomes, the more government it can buy. And next, the Wall Street secret government protects its own. And Wall Street is a clear and present danger to democracy. Number 6, Occupy Wall Street is fundamentally correct, but we need more. The man that's helping bring this all to light is here now to talk more about it, economist and author Les Leopold. He joins us now from Montclair, New Jersey. Welcome, Les. So you say that Wall Street and Washington are running this secret government. How are they doing this?
Well, the fundamental way that it's done is through a revolving door where the top Wall Street executives become the head of the Treasury. And at the height of the crisis, unbeknownst to anybody in Congress, the secret government provided Wall Street with $7.77 trillion of loans. Meanwhile, we were told the TARP program of $700 billion was all there was to it. And those people who were trying to regulate the banks, who were considering legislation to go back to Glass-Steagall, to break up the large banks, those people were not told, those congressional leaders were not told of the incredibly bad condition that the Wall Street banks were in and of these secret loans.
And so the banks, you also say that the banks, they were getting in bigger trouble than the public knew about. What do you mean by that?
Well, without this $7.77 trillion of money, they would have been toast. They would have been on the verge of bankruptcy or bankrupt, and the case for breaking them up and reorganizing our banking system would have been much greater. Instead, the desire to create stability was first and foremost, which meant financing. We actually financed the large banks to grow even larger. While we were complaining about too big to fail, we made them bigger. And it was done secretly. That's the bad part, because it means that our democratic processes are being subverted, even from our congressional leaders.
So this is all happening with public taxpayer money, and this is all happening, you say, secretly, so Congress doesn't even know about it. Who does know about it?
Well, it's a very small cabal. It would be the Treasury Secretary, the head of the Federal Reserve, and the top bankers. The congressmen, there was serious discussion about breaking up the large banks. After all, they had caused this crash. It wasn't, consumers getting fat on loans. it was the gambling spree that Wall Street went on, and these banks were in serious trouble. So the idea of breaking them up and reinstituting Glass-Steagall, separating commercial banking from investment banking, was on the agenda, was being discussed. Now, if those congressmen knew that that these secret loans were being given out, then they might have acted more forcefully. Instead, they were told, oh no, these banks are fine. We need them to compete in the world economy. They produce jobs, blah, blah, blah.
And you also say that Wall Street, this secret government, they serve to protect themselves rather than the public. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, this is an unbelievable story. Hank Paulson, who was Treasury Secretary under Bush, was about to nationalize Fannie and Freddie, take them over because they were in such bad shape. When in doing so, it would wipe out the shareholder value of those companies. Meanwhile, he was telling Congress and the public that it was going to take some minor fixes and some audits and everything would be okay. But he secretly met with a room full of hedge fund managers who had a lot to gain from this information. He gave them this information before he told Congress and before he told the public. Now, we don't know for sure whether or not these hedge funds then shorted the stock or got out of Freddie and Fannie, but they might have. But what is he doing meeting with top hedge fund people and not meeting with congressional leaders, not telling the public? And that's absolutely outrageous.
Is it legal for this to go down to add?
I'm afraid it is. I'm afraid it is because A, our laws are so porous about this, and B, Hank Paulson didn't actually make any money on it. So he's not really committing insider trading. Now, it's unclear whether or not a law was broken if other people acted on that information. Probably not. But what's being broken is democracy. You can't have the Treasury Secretary give tips to his old buddies from Goldman Sachs who now ran these hedge funds. That is absolutely outrageous. And I'm surprised, if that word got out, there might be more Occupy Wall Street demonstrations because it's just simply outrageous for that to happen.
And as you said, this Wall Street is a danger to democracy. And you say that Occupy Wall Street is fundamentally correct, and they're on the right track, but we need more. What else needs to happen? Well,
we need places for the rest of us to express our outrage. People like me are not going to sleep on the concrete. It's just not going to happen. People with families are not going to, and jobs and whatnot, are not going to participate at that level. So how do we participate? How do we show our democratic outrage? It's not enough to just go to the ballot box because we know that both parties are very much beholden to Wall Street. Whether it was a Democrat with Robert Rubin from Citigroup as Treasury Secretary or Hank Paulson from Goldman Sachs, it doesn't really matter. So we need to be able to express ourselves. What I'd like to see happen actually would be for all kinds of people to set up their own 99% clubs to help dramatize and to come up with our own ways of protesting about these issues.
Les, thank you so much for sharing all this with us. And that was economist and author Les Leopold.
All right, folks, welcome to the New World Order News. That from RT. And RT is generally in the movement considered to be a reliable source, but we see them there pushing the idea that Occupy Wall Street is something good, when I've exposed months ago that the Occupy movement is controlled opposition. And I'm going to say it like a broken record. The best way to control your opposition is to lead it. That was said by Lenin. Occupy Wall Street is the New World Order, leading its own opposition. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean every activist is part of that, or that doesn't mean they know it, but they are part of it. If they're in the Occupy movement, they're part of it. They just don't know it. But getting back to what they were saying there, she said, who's the real criminals here? He said, the Treasury Secretary and the leaders of the banks and the Federal Reserve Chairman. The Treasury Secretary's name is Timothy Geithner. If you Google or YouTube or Google Image, go to Google Images and put in Geithner Bilderberg. The Bilderberg is where the New World Order meets to discuss how they're going to take over the world, or how they're going to continue their dominance over the world. Timothy Geithner attends those meetings. Your Treasury Secretary is part and parcel with the New World Order. He attends the Bilderberg meetings. Now, this shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody who knows that your president is selected, not elected. Do I have to remind people that when Hillary was running against Obama, they both met in secret at a Bilderberg meeting, and Obama was selected. So the world is not the way that it is presented to you by your television, by the mainstream media, by your history teachers in school. You've been lied to since day one. I'm here to unravel the lies and to try to bring you to a point of reasoning again, to a point where you can think critically, you can take in information without bias, and come to logical conclusions. You're not going to like the logical conclusions that you come to, but at least it will be a logical conclusion, not, a thought based in fear. I need to drag you out of the trauma-based mind control that the majority of the population is in right now. Speaking of which, we do have some breaking news. And that is that Iran is claiming to have shot down a United States drone. Now, the United States is replying, it was in Afghanistan. Iran would not shoot down a drone that was flying over Afghanistan. The drone was in Iran. Iran shot down a United States drone that was committing a crime, invading Iran's airspace. And I'm sure there's some people out there who are going to say, well, why would you believe Iran over the United States of America? Well, I'll tell you why. Because Ahmadinejad came out and said 9/11 was an inside job. Ahmadinejad, not that I'm saying the man is just, perfect, but he took a vow. He took a vow and he said, I'm not going to get a home for my father until every Iranian citizen has a home. And his father's still homeless. He packs a brown bag lunch every day he goes to work. He's the president of Iran. And he packs his own lunch. His wife packs it for him. This is not a man who's about money. This is not a man who's about power. He stood up and told the world that 9/11 was an inside job. Obviously, long after we had already known it and drawn that conclusion. His nation, Iran, is now surrounded by countries that are occupied or controlled by the New World Order. And I've showed you that image before. Every single nation bordering Iran, we basically control it. So now that Iran has shot down a drone, the mainstream media seems to be talking rather conservatively about this incident. We'll see where it goes. But you have to remember, this did not just start. For how many years have they been playing up the, an American hiker got lost in Iran and Iran took him hostage? How long have they been playing that game? Now, what happens if an Iranian is found in the United States with no passport? What do they do? I don't know what they do. I don't know what they do. Maybe they detain him. Maybe they detain him and ask him, what are you doing here? Where's your papers? And so on. And at that point in time, when that's done, Iran would be telling its citizens, America has taken an Iranian citizen hostage, wouldn't they? So you have to look at things from more than one angle. You can't be spoon-fed information by the mainstream media, by your television, by your cable company, all of whom have a vested interest in lying to you and in deceiving you. Now, because I have some time here, I'm going to move on to another story, which is that the Obama administration admits to anti-terrorism vaccination program. The CIA's fake vaccination program in Pakistan reveals the moral bankruptcy of American spooks. For those who don't know, a spook is like a CIA agent, that nobody knows is a CIA agent. Especially when they're in foreign lands, they're referred to as spooks. Did the CIA's vaccination ruse in Pakistan violate public trust? This was a story from the Open-Ended War last year in a remote area of Afghanistan. We're going to have a break. We'll see where it goes from here. This broadcast is going to go all over the place, folks, so hang on tight.
You're listening to Hardcore Harry, and I am Death to the New World Order, streaming to you live at freethinkradio.com, unitedtruthseekers.com, and eternally at d2nwo.com.
Russia's assessment of the cause of the Syrian unrest points the finger of blame firmly at an armed opposition. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov also says it's time now to stop dealing in ultimatums and get back to peace talks. A UN investigation earlier stated that Syrian forces had committed crimes against humanity in their brutal treatment of anti-government demonstrators. Almost 4,000 people have been killed after months of unrest. The EU, meantime, is tightening the economic screws on the Syrian regime, and it's considering now an arms embargo, something that Moscow strongly opposes. Let's get up to speed on this one with Peter R. Get his thoughts. He's a Middle East consultant. He's on the line from Birmingham, the UK. Peter, very good to see you tonight. Do you believe these further sanctions that are being talked about are much of a help from the Western states to end what we're seeing, this ongoing violence in Syria?
No, certainly not. I feel any sanctions that are imposed, obviously the people of Syria are the ultimate victims, but I don't think it's going to alter what is panning out in Syria at the moment. What we have here is the ultimate, the sort of tip of the iceberg on the Arab Spring, which is over-influenced by Western infiltrating into Syria. So when the International Court of Justice or the UN or Geneva start pointing fingers at the regime within Syria, they've got to understand that a lot of that trouble is flared up from the Western side. We know now that the French are training militia both on the Turkey side of the border and also in Lebanon. So they're very much involved, and they're just intimidating the situation. A lot of people who are being killed are actually being killed by special forces, CIA, Mossad, or whatever. So what you see, what you hear, is really, it's like a Shakespearean play. The actors are Obama, Cameron, Sarkozy, Clinton, and William Hague, who are very bad at play acting. And the truth really is coming out through stations like yourself, Press TV and Al Jazeera, whatever. Why would we have to go to the Middle East to learn the truth? This is all a false charade.
Well, picking up on what you're saying there and reiterating Russia's view that the armed opposition is mostly behind the unrest. So if that's the case, why do you think Europe and the US is focusing solely on the Assad regime? It's again, as you're saying, it's a skewed way of looking at it, isn't it?
Well, as I said on your program once before and on other programs, you've got to understand that this crisis was planned back in '97 by Paul Wolfowitz, and it was carried on again after 9/11 when General Clark, the ex-Supreme Commander in NATO Europe, actually was privy to a very confidential document that said the Pentagon, the US military, were going to take over 7 countries. Syria was part of that plan, and that is panning out now. You've got to understand that the Cold War has never finished. The Crusades have never finished, and so much for the Arab League. You talk about the union of the Islam movement. They're supposed to be brothers and sisters. They turned their back on their counterparts in the Balkans. They turned their backs on Iraq, Afghanistan, in 2006 Lebanon, in Gaza 2008 and 9, and totally turned their back on Libya. They're doing the same game again. You've got to understand the Arab League is a puppet to America, a puppet to the United Nations, all being a puppet of the New World Order.
Is it too late for talk then? I mean, Russia's reiterated calls again for Syria to have dialogue and reforms. Is that too late?
I think it is. It's like the Palestinian-Israel situation. You've got to understand as well that at the top of all this is a very strong Zionist implication, who control the politics of America, in the UK and in Europe. And they're actually playing the cards because it's those people that fund the politicians. So it's going to be a one-sided game. I think we're beyond dialogue, and it's obviously showing exactly the same trend as Libya. The French are on about forming a humanitarian corridor. You've heard all this before. Now, war crimes. What about the war crimes from the West of blasting Libya and all these other countries with depleted uranium, killing 1 million people in Iraq? Come on, where's this going to end?
Peter, it's a complicated and troubling picture you paint there. Middle East consultant as you are, talking to us, bring us your thoughts from Birmingham. Thanks for being on the programme.
All right, so my regular viewers will understand just exactly what's going on there. If you don't understand what's going on there, I need you to open another tab on your browser, go to YouTube, and enter D2NWO Revolution Business. No. D2NWO Engineered Revolution. What's going on there? As he stated, there was a plan to overtake 7 countries. And that man said everything just exactly right. And we don't get that very often, even on the media, which is less controlled, like RT. Bottom line, they did make a plan, and I can sit here and give you references all day long. You can put in YouTube or in Google, Wesley Clark states 7 countries, because he saw the document and he stated it in an interview or in a lecture he gave. He talked about it. We are taking over nations from the inside out by drugging the youth, putting out a bunch of propaganda, undermining the government that's there, and sending in operatives, CIA, spooks, and otherwise to lead armed revolutions against them, which are not revolutions. It's literally a nation invading another nation under false pretenses, acting like they are Afghanistans, or acting like they are Libyans, or acting like they are Syrians in this case. Now, here's the issue, and this is big. We are hearing talks about possibly the spark of World War III here, and we're hearing this from a lot of different nations. In other words, Iran may be the flashpoint, and I don't want to be an alarmist, so I'm not going to go here any more than to say people are saying this is getting very, very, very dangerous. So it might be something to keep an eye on. All we know for sure, the United States, the New World Order is engineering revolutions. They're taking over all of the Arab countries, and they're taking them over very fast. As well, the United States of America seems to have an engineered revolution going on called the Occupy movement, and they're going to keep fanning those flames. There was a story that there was 25,000 people marching on Washington, D.C. the other day, not directly related to the Occupy movement, but that are embracing the same sorts of slogans and statements and carrying the same signs. So undoubtedly, we are seeing what appears to be an engineered revolution in the United States. The question is, what are they going for here? Are they going to try to overthrow the government? Are they going to try to cancel the elections? What are they up to here? Are they going to try and make sure Obama wins? How can Obama win re-election if there's a revolution going on? I mean, you would think that'd be like a point blank, you lose kind of scenario for the incumbent, wouldn't you? That said, we know that George Soros, move on. We know that the New World Order is behind this. So we're not quite sure what's going on there. I'm going to get back to this story on the CIA vaccination ruse in Pakistan. And what it comes down to, President Obama awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously earlier this year because of some killings in the Taliban, and the victims, they claimed, were not really medical personnel. They were spies on a clandestine mission against the Mujahideen, which are probably the freaking good guys. That's the way everything is now. Everything is backwards, and everything is a lie when they say there are Libyan rebels. They say, oh, we're working with Al-Qaeda now. If you're at war with terror, you're at war with Al-Qaeda, but you're working with them in Libya. I mean, we're approaching the 2 + 2 = 5 phase in this war with the New World Order that most people are not fighting. Screw this article. We're going to move on to something else, and this is that the Senate has approved a bill that legalizes sodomy and bestiality in the United States military, and not to get too deep into the concept of becoming a sovereign citizen and how our legal system works, but it's a bill. These things are called bills. They're called acts. The Patriot Act, because it is not a law. It's not a legal law. It's a bill. Well, it's a bill because it hasn't become law yet. Once it does, it'll probably be called an act. And I mean, people have fun with this. You know, they say, I'm not going into it. I'm not prepared to deal with the sovereign stuff. Check out Bill Faust for that sometime. But they already killed him, so just so you know, you won't be hearing from him anymore. The Senate on Thursday evening voted 93-7 to approve a defense authorization bill that includes a provision which not only repeals the military law on sodomy, it also repeals the military ban on sex with animals or bestiality. So this is the bill that basically says they can kidnap and detain United States citizens, but it's being presented as a moral issue in relation to sex here. What is the source on this? CNS News, whatever. It states any person subject to this chapter who engages in unnatural carnal copulation with another person of the same or opposite sex with an animal is guilty of sodomy. Who cares? We're done with that one. And that's the way it is now, folks. When I first started doing this years ago, I had to scrounge to try and figure out what was really going on and to try and get something relevant, you know, that I could talk about, that something was being exposed. Now the news and the information is flying at me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I got fans sending me stuff, and it's just unbelievable. And it's good. It's very, very good. You just have to know who you can trust and who you can't. And by the way, if you see something from the EU Times, I think it's eutimes.org, no, you cannot trust that. Don't post it. Obamacare, bad news for sick workers. The employer mandates and many regulations in Obamacare were sold as protections for the American worker, and especially sick and underinsured workers. But instead, as a new study shows, employers will face strong incentives for offering cheaper coverage options that appeal to young and healthy employees, while they ask their sicker, older employees to voluntarily go to statewide exchanges. The article argues that federal health care reform may induce employers to redesign their health plans so that low-risk employees retain employer-sponsored insurance, but high-risk employees opt out of ESI in favor of insurance available in the individual market. It shows that such a strategy would shift health care expenses for high-risk employees from employers and their low-risk employees to the public at large. In other words, they're going to dump old people off the health plans. I mean, we don't need all the complicated talk here. Obamacare incentivizes corporations to ditch the old people, and this is speaking about it in terms of health coverage, but the reality is they'll just get rid of the old people altogether. They'll let them go. They'll lay them off. They'll fire them. They'll say, oh, we just don't need you anymore, and so on. Inevitably, that's what's going to happen. There's already a strong incentive for that, because how many health issues is somebody like me going to have? I'm young. I'm not going to have health issues. Somebody who is 60, though, they're going to have health issues. So there's already a massive incentive to get rid of them. And now when you're talking about these changes in health care, the incentive is even greater. Of course, we know what they're moving towards here is euthanasia. There's no doubt about that on the face of the earth. They are moving towards euthanasia, and it will happen in our lifetimes. Government controlled nonetheless. The authors of the study seem to blame employers for this targeted dumping or undermining of health reform. All right, we're done with that one. And we will be flying through some news today. That's just the way it has to be. And that's because this is the New World Order News. We're not here to mess around. We have another hidden secret in Obamacare. And I've spoken about this in the past, possibly before I was live streaming, so let's get it on the record. In Obamacare. Coming up right after this break, after I get done talking about whatever this is about.
You're listening to Hardcore Harry, and I am Death. To the New World Order, streaming to you live at freethinkradio.com, unitedtruthseekers.com, and eternally at d2nwo.com.
Welcome back. Derivatives are not the only problem facing the financial system. We want to bring in some other stories. Bloomberg has reported that Henry Paulson, when he was Treasury Secretary of the U.S., told several hedge fund managers back in July of 2008 that a government takeover of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac was in the cards, that this could happen. Now, this is even though he had testified before the Senate about a week earlier saying that government intervention was not likely in the cards. Now, of course, we know what happened. The government came in and did take over Freddie and Fannie back in September of 2008. Okay, now fast forward. What do we see? We see the MF Global saga continue, and now it turns out Jon Corzine reportedly bet $11.5 billion on European sovereign debt, trying to make his now bankrupt firm profitable, and this is almost 2 times what he disclosed to investors. So what do these stories have in common? Well, crony capitalism, okay? What role, though, does it play in giving an advantage to big investors at the expense of everyone else? I'd like to bring back in Nomi Prince to have this discussion. She's senior fellow at the think tank Demos, also author of the book Black Tuesday, which you see there, and she's in LA. And Nomi, actually really quickly, before we get to these stories today, I just want to follow up with the derivatives conversation because there's so much to touch upon, and I know our producer, Dimitri Kofinas, wants to get into this discussion to ask you something about it.
Hey, Nomi, my question had to do with your conversation with Lauren before. You were talking about how the 5 biggest banks have about 96% of the OTC derivatives market. And to me, that seems, or rather, let me ask it this way, how is that different than a racket? Because if the mafia is running a protection racket, they basically go to local stores and they say, give us this much money every month or we're going to light your house on fire. How is it different when these banks are in such a position where they can continue to take risks like this, expanding the size of the OTC market by over $100 trillion, but every time there's a problem, they say, if you don't bail us out or give us more money, we're just going to crash your economy?
It's very like the mafia. The thing that the banks have going for them that sort of local mafia bosses might not is that they can throw in the fear factor, definitely hold guns to the international community's head, but they also have the knowledge that the government is A, going to subsidize them, and B, even before subsidization is needed to cover losses that might happen, they have the FDIC, who is effectively ensuring the deposits that these banks hold. Goldman Sachs doesn't really hold deposits, but they got to be called a bank in the fall of 2008 anyway and have that protection. So they even have protection into creating the risk. They know they're going to get subsidized taking it out. So they're definitely like a government-sponsored mafia in that respect.
And Nomi, it's not just subsidies. You also have, evidently, government officials coming in and telling you what's going to happen. I want to go back to 2008 with this report that Hank Paulson was meeting with hedge fund managers, Wall Street execs, and telling them that there could be a takeover of Fannie and Freddie. What the heck was he doing meeting with these people, having this conversation during the height of the financial crisis?
That specifically goes to the crony capitalism idea. I'll say that the other commonality between MF Global leader Jon Corzine and Hank Paulson when he was Treasury Secretary is that they both ran Goldman Sachs. So they're coming from a position where what they understand, what they know, what they have soft spots for, what they get money out of, what they got money out of, is Wall Street, is the way in which those financial opportunities come by them, in which financial firms work. And so Hank Paulson, hanging around a bunch of hedge fund and money market and private equity fund managers is with his people. His people are not, the United States citizens. His people are these people. So when he is in front of them and sharing information that he should not be sharing as a public servant, a public servant to the United States population, it doesn't even cross his mind. And there's no legal framework to keep him from doing that. So he's specifically sharing what he knows with these people. And as you mentioned, he's also withholding information from Congress. So effectively, definitely picking a side, keeping the side that he was on before he got to the position, and keeping his side, of course, in that position. And it's no different with Jon Corzine. He didn't become the Treasury Secretary, he became a senator, he became a governor, and now he's effectively hiding the money that he bet. We're talking about bets before on European sovereigns, and he hasn't even been arrested yet. He doesn't even have to talk about the investigation behind this for another almost 2 or 3 weeks, if anything comes of that, which it may not.
So with Jon Corzine and with this report that $11.5 billion was what he was betting on European sovereign debt, which is twice what he disclosed to investors, if this is true, are you suggesting that he gets away with this kind of thing because of the Goldman Sachs, the political connections, the crony capitalism?
I'm going to say if he does get away with it, it's definitely because of those. I mean, he has... I continually to be astonished at how so many things that happen that are absolute criminal activities, that are frauds, that are grand larcenies, that are wrong by SEC rules, get basically pardoned or swept under the carpet or thrown little fines and sort of go away, and little settlements and go away. Jon Corzine, mixed money within his firm, hasn't reported money. I mean, he's committed fraud. If he does get away with that fraud, it will be because he's been able to somehow confuse the extent to which that fraud was committed, and it's more simple fraud than what Goldman Sachs as a company might have created with their CDOs and other things that they also were in front of investigation committees for and got no punishment really except some settlements in relation to. So if that happens, it's because of his relationships with all of these people. But it's going to be harder for him, hopefully, to get away with it because it's so obviously criminal. It doesn't require a whole lot of explanation as to why it's criminal. It's like I had the money disappeared. I said it was this much, now it's actually this much. I mean, these are very clear instances and clear actions, so hopefully he will not get away with them. But if he does, it is because of those connections.
And of course we will see, but I just want to ask you, because you did bring up the Goldman Sachs connection, and because you did used to be at Goldman Sachs, we often hear these reports of crony capitalism and, this connection of so-and-so worked at Goldman with this person. Is it really like that? Is it really kind of a boys and girls club where you kind of support people from Goldman, or are more likely to kind of have these opportunities?
It's very much a boys' club, really. I mean, yes, I was there, and yes, I'm not a boy, but it tends to be a boys' club. It tends to be, relationships within the firm when these people leave the firm that are cultivated over years, that started in universities, that started with family relationships. I mean, there's so much that goes into this combination of sort of crony capitalism and old boys network all rolled up into one that starts at a level of international finance and sort of goes into international politics and back the other way. So yeah, it is definitely like that. It's all very much, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. If you're really out in the cold, I might ignore you because I don't want to get in trouble also, but otherwise, you're in my tent. I mean, there's a lot of that all the time.
Okay, great. It's really great to have that expertise because, of course, you were in the trenches there, and now you're connecting the dots for us. That was Nomi Prince. She's from the think tank Demos, also the author of many books.
Uh-oh, she's connecting the dots. They say a conspiracy theorist is somebody who draws connections between seemingly disparate items. She's connecting the dots, and she's doing what any logical, rational thinking person would do. Now, the trick is they have people dumbed down to the point where they're literally incapable of connecting the dots, of drawing the connections. That's the way they want it. They want you stupid so that you sit around, watch football, and just watch TV. You do nothing while they literally rob the nation blind. And that's what they're doing. They're robbing the nation blind. They say one of the last acts of any what is it? One of the last acts of any tyrannical dictatorship is to bankrupt the Treasury. Now, this statement was made back in the day when we thought of nations as separate entities. This is no longer the case. And so you have a worldwide, a global elite, a new world order, bankrupting many, many treasuries all at the same time. You understand? That's why there just happens to be rioting in Greece because of their financial situation. That's why they were pressuring Iceland. That's why we have it going on here. Because the New World Order is worldwide, and they're bankrupting everybody all at once. It could be worse than it is because I can't see the American people actually legitimately rising up under almost any circumstance. I just can't see it happening. And I got to be honest with you, I think most people are literally fighting a fog in their own heads in that they could see somebody be shot down in the street and they would just close the curtains. They're living in fear. They're cowards. And this is the few people even know what's going on. Now, if I seem a little abnormally quiet today, it's because it's Sunday. I don't sleep Saturday night, so I haven't slept since Friday. So I am a little calmer than usual, and that's probably a good thing. I don't know. I haven't heard a lot about how people react when I kind of lose it on air. So I won't be losing it on air. I only have a little bit of caffeine here. But I have avoided a lot of the traps other people walk into. I retained my sanity. I retained my intellectual capacity, and I've retained my God-given ability to have righteous indignation when it is needed. And speaking of which, they recently passed Senate Bill 1867, giving the government the right to indefinitely detain American citizens with no charge and no trial. This passed, I think it was 93-7. 93-7 in the Senate. And we're going to be seeing a segment here from Howard Nema of We Are Change Radio. He called up the White House and he did it on air, which is good. And he basically shows people, look, this is what you can do, this is what you should do. And I found that to be something people need to see. And I didn't feel like doing it myself, so we're going to watch Howard Nema do it. And I don't know if that's this hour or next hour, but it's coming up. House Bill 1867 is essentially the end of the Republic. It is the end of freedom. It is essentially turning America into Nazi Germany 1939, where people will be living in fear, where people will turn other people in just to keep the spotlight off of themselves. We're heading towards that era, and we're also heading towards the era where everybody is living a lie, and they know they're living a lie. Orwell spoke a lot about this. If you remember 1984, where they were told 2 + 2 = 5. If the state says 2 + 2 is 5, then you will believe 2 + 2 is 5, even while you know 2 + 2 is 4, because you must be in agreement with the state no matter what. Those are the Nazi times that we're headed toward. Now, I already have a special broadcast made for Monday. I thought about playing it today, but the listenership was just too low, and I spent too much time perfecting the broadcast. So that will be coming up Monday, 10 p.m. Eastern. Meantime, we're going to go back to this bill, and it is a little bit of an older bill, but it's far more, well, it's just as important. And this refers to RFID chip implants, or what some might call the mark of the beast. And essentially what we're looking at is Senate Healthcare Bill H.R. 3200 was passed and signed into law. This is Obamacare. Pretty sure that's what it is right there. And this is a pretty lame article wrote up, so I'll probably skip it. But the terminology I'm looking for here, they don't even have it on here. Idiots. You know, it's like when you see big text, you should already know. They don't know what they're doing. essentially, the biochip implant has already been passed into law under the guise of it being a medical device. I think it's called a Class 3 medical implant, something like that. Class 2 or Class 3 medical implant. In other words, you know how legal things are termed. The RFID biochip implant fits the description of what has been made legal in the healthcare bill and called a Class 3 medical implant. I'll have more on that another day.
You're listening to Hardcore Harry, and I am Death to the New World Order, streaming to you live at freethinkradio.com, unitedtruthseekers.com, and eternally at d2nwo.com.
But he left one final warning.
1984 is, I believe, a quite terrifying masterpiece. So terrifying, in fact, I don't think I should like to read another like it.
I am not absolutely dissatisfied with it. I think it is a good idea, but the execution would have been better if I had not been under the influence of TB when I wrote it.
You once claimed that you have an ability to face unpleasant facts. Is that what you've demonstrated in 1984 by drawing an accurate portrait of the future?
I think that allowing for the book being, after all, a parody, something like 1984 could actually happen. This is the direction the world is going in at the present time. In our world, there will be no emotions except fear, rage, triumph, and self-abasement. The sex instinct will be eradicated. We shall abolish the orgasm. There will be no loyalty except loyalty to the party. But always there will be the intoxication of power. Always, at every moment, there will be the thrill of victory, the sensation of trampling on an enemy who is helpless. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen. It depends on you.
My name is Troy McGrath. I'm the founder of WideAwakeNews.com and a host on the Rinse Radio Network. 3.5 years of extraordinary action. 3.5 years of these measures that have been taken in order to allegedly save the economy of the world. Trillions upon trillions of dollars being spent, lawsuits having to be leveled to find out where this money is went, and what do we have for it to show for it. We have a world that has been submerged in debt. We have Europe falling apart right now because of sovereign debt. We need to remember where this debt came from. You know, they want us to believe, if you're in Germany or France or Portugal or Ireland or Spain or Italy or the United States or Canada or Mexico, it doesn't matter. You're supposed to blame the guy across the border for being fat, lazy, out of shape, retiring at 15 years old and having cradle-to-grave coverage. This is why the world's loaded up with sovereign debt. This is why there's more sovereign debt than there is global GDP. But the reality of it is all these extraordinary measures that we've seen take place over the last 3.5, 4 years have brought us this sovereign debt crisis. Shifting private fraudulent failure on these too big to fail banks that own the central banks of the world, shifting their failure onto the people of the world, calling it sovereign debt, having these governments spend untold trillions of dollars to keep the banking system going. This is what's loaded up the planet with sovereign debt, and the latest actions of the Federal Reserve show, and central banks around the world, show who they serve. They serve the private banks that make up their ownership. This is why we've seen this liquidity swap occur. This is why we've seen the funding rate drop to keep the central banks, or to keep the banks in Europe from absolutely falling apart. We have rumors spreading around everywhere that a bunch of European banks are about to go under, hence this emergency action being taken. The fact of the matter is the people of this planet are continuing to be submerged in fraudulent failure, and we need to wake up to it. We need to understand that when people are in the streets protesting, they're not protesting because they're lazy hippie leftists. They're not protesting because they're crazy right-wing Tea Party members. They're protesting because they have no voice and they have no control over their future. Hence the acts of the Federal Reserve and central banks without the will of the people of this planet occurring overnight in the shadows. We wake up to it, and the markets that are completely and totally manipulated and owned by the federal bank, for the Federal Reserve System and the central banking system, celebrate this fact. Celebrate this loss of freedom. Celebrate the fact that these too big to fails will be kept alive just a few more days until the right kind of leadership can be installed inside of Europe to implement more debt onto the people of Europe. Stories are attached. That's all I got.
All right. Well, that's the wonderful thing about the internet right there, is I can get anybody's opinion on the face of the earth, and I like to do that. I'll present some news clips, sometimes even from the mainstream media, but I especially like to present people's personal viewpoints, because when somebody has a personal viewpoint, they feel passionately enough to actually spend the time recording it, uploading it. That means they've looked into it, they've researched it, and it's an informed opinion. Believe it or not, I don't know everything, and I don't have time to research everything. Finances is something that bores me to death, and I find it blatantly obvious on the face of it that the markets are manipulated. That, I mean, we all know what the Federal Reserve is doing, the central banks. The first thing they did when they took Libya, when they got into Libya, was to set up a central bank. That's how they control the world. The New World Order is the international banking cartels, and they control the world through what is called Federal Reserve banking. And this is essentially, I don't want to go too deep into it, but imagine, fine, I'll go back, okay? Way back in the day. Think back before they had dollars, okay? Especially out west, the gold rush, remember that? And people had gold, and they'd walk around with their gold, and some people had a lot of gold. They were rich, and they didn't want to walk around with all that gold. Somebody'd shoot them and take their gold. So they started leaving their gold with the goldsmith. Who else are you going to leave it with? There was no such thing as a bank at the point in time. So they started leaving the gold with the goldsmith. And the goldsmith was like, sure, I'll hang on to your gold. So he'd hang on to the gold. And he ended up having a lot of gold. The goldsmith ended up having a lot of gold. And notice people weren't coming to get their gold all the time. So he just had this big pile of gold. He had it in the back. Nobody could see it. So everybody just assumed the goldsmith had their gold. And one day the goldsmith got up and thought, you know, I could really, if I lent this gold out, because nobody's coming to get it anyway, if I lent this gold out, I could make money on the interest, and nobody would ever know. Nobody would ever know that I took their gold, gave it to somebody else, and then charged interest on it. And they'll pay me back faster than anybody's coming to collect their gold to begin with anyway. Everybody's just assuming that I have it. And that was the beginning of fractional reserve lending, which is to say that only a fraction of the money given to the bank is held in the reserves. The rest of it is out the door because they want to make interest. So if a bank has $100,000, $90,000 is loaned out so they can make that interest. That's how they're controlling the world. That's how they're collapsing the economies. It's obvious. Fractional reserve lending. And that's all the deeper. I'm going to go into that right now because this is the New World Order news. I've done an entire broadcast on that once or twice already. But you need to understand the New World Order is real. It is a maniacal control on mankind, and there are specific means that they use to do this. Why do you think that the Muslims will not pay interest? It's called usury. U-S-A-R-Y. Usury. And the financial world will try to make special financial instruments that don't involve interest for people who have that belief system. But trust me, one way or another, they're still getting them. Why do you think Christ turned over the tables in the temple? Remember the money changers? Usury is forbidden, but now it's been embraced, and all of mankind has been enslaved through this. We have many presidents who were killed for fighting the Federal Reserve System, for fighting a central bank, for trying to print their own money by, legally by the Constitution. And really, it's no different than the credit cards that you get in the mail. Okay, you get a credit card and you're like, oh cool, I have a credit card. Maybe I'll go out and buy something. And you're going to pay interest on it. This is how they get you, and nothing has changed. The same is true with the Federal Reserve System. It's a little bit opposite, where actually you give the bank money and then they make interest on it. So if they give you money on a credit card, they make interest on it. If you give them money by putting your money in the bank, they make interest on it. They always make interest no matter which way the money's going. I'm not going to get into how they control the circulation of money, the amount of money that they print, and so on. That's not what this broadcast is about. Let's talk a little bit about the police state. 30 signs that the United States of America is being turned into a giant prison. Now, all you have to do is look at the traffic lights, because in my small town, if you look at the traffic lights, each intersection, there's 8 cameras now. 8 cameras at every intersection. And I run red lights constantly. I've never gotten a ticket for running a red light. That's not what the cameras are for. We're in a lot of trouble, people. Shit.
You're listening to Hardcore Harry, and I am Death to the New World Order, streaming to you live, freethinkradio.com, unitedtruthseekers.com, and eternally at d2nwo.com.
Crossing Rockefeller Plaza from the Wall Street Christmas meal, where the algorithm forecasts had nothing to reveal. De La Village despondencies, Prometheus looked down. I stole the golden flame, Madoff stole the crown. Where has the money gone? Where has the money gone? Where did it go? Where did it go? Where has the money gone? Where did the money go? Back in his headquarters on the 22nd floor, he dismisses the cleaners early and he bolts the office door. A waste bin for his blood, pills to ease the pain, a parcel knife to take his life and dispatch the shame. Take away the shame, he cried, for I am all at sea, and I haven't got a compass for this catastrophe. A hurricane of accusations raging on and on. They're all asking the same question. Where has the money gone? Where did it go? Where has the money gone? Where did the money go? Where has the money gone? Where has the money gone? Where did it go? this shame, he cried, for I am all at sea, and I haven't got a compass for this catastrophe. A hurricane of accusations raging on and on. They're all asking the same question: where has all the money gone? Dawn comes back upon his beat through the cold streets of Manhattan, stirring homeless hobos sleep like a copper with his baton. But thieves don't sleep in doorways nor beg out.